So after 2 delays, Conan's Age of Heroes Chapter 1 update is out right now. It was originally scheduled after those delays to be released on September 5th, tomorrow. However, the devs put out a forum post basically saying they'd resolved the issues they initially delayed for and decided to move the release up to yesterday, the 3rd of September. So with all that being said, let's look at the patch notes and get some brief first impressions of the features. Also, quick self-promo. Patreon linked in the pinned comment, join as a free member to get previews of what's coming, join the $10 tier and above to get access to videos before they're here on YouTube, join us if you want to get the Age of Heroes news early and support the channel. Self-promo over, let's get into the update. Patch notes, there's a fair bit here, so let's go over the notable items. Of course, beta client, so things are subject to change, and there are 2 main features of this update, living settlements and companions. Living settlements, thralls or NPCs, radius effect on benches, new station GUI, all the stuff we already know. Companions, unique voice-acted followers with quests. The quests are stated as multi-day questlines, so probably quite lengthy. The first companion is the mysterious sorcerer Lu Fei, found east of the Celestial Plaza, and the second is Freya, found of course at Freya's hovel. Each companion has several unique perks determined by the actions you make during their quests. Over to the general notes, servers on the beta client will reset every 12 hours instead of 24. Barkeepers can now be rescued from the new cages found across the exiled lands, and crafters can now be found in prisoner cages upon completing a purge. Mail hands no longer clip through the bloodletter shield, you can harvest large crystal nodes with axes, pickaxes and picks, NPCs no longer teleport far away from their chair when they're attacked, and finally, you can now forcibly remove tavern patrons from your tavern by engaging in combat with them. I know a lot of people requested that and I'm quite happy to see it in the patch notes. Onto the thrall changes. Thrall's status is now hidden in nameplates when the thrall is not following, guarding or scouting. Combat thralls set to guard or scout retain their current displayed orders, but thralls not set to guard or scout will have their status hidden by default. Additionally, nameplates of thralls following you have been expanded to include more useful information. That includes displaying their engagement behaviour, passive, defensive, aggressive, etc., alongside their current orders like attack, moving, fleeing and so on. The only exception are pacifist followers like mounts, they will just display following. The dev kit has been adjusted, delving now works more reliably and has been restructured to use gameplay tags. In the inventory on gamepad you can now reset the sorting type and filter by long pressing R3 or L3. Finally, there are some known issues. Disconnecting during Lu Fei's ritual may break the circle of power functionality for all server players until reset. If a group of players complete Freya's final fight quest together, Freya's dialogue for recruitment may not open until server reset. Freya might also be missing her sword after recruiting her. If a player completes the Forge battle around another player, they will be unable to start it. Forge mobs may also not despawn during the Forge fight, and finally Lu Fei's Corrupting Curse perk doesn't deal damage over time to any enemy, and companions may have no perks if the player recruiting them is part of a clan. A fair few known issues, but because they're already known, hopefully fixes are already in the works, and for some of them that require a server restart, I presume that's probably why the server restarts for every 12 hours on the beta and not 24. So, those are the patch notes. Let's look at the actual features in-game. The first thing you're likely to notice are the new main menu screens. They're similar to the old Battle Pass art, but there's actually multiple of them. A small touch, but pretty nice. Now, let's get into the actual meat of it. Firstly, living settlements. I tested this on single player and I gotta say it's a lot smoother than I initially expected. There was an initial bug of pre-placed thralls being static on benches even after they'd been removed and placed in the world. I fixed that by removing and replacing the bench itself, but I suspect a server reset might fix it too if you're on an official. Alongside the thralls of course being able to be dressed up and walk around, which there isn't really too much issue with, this system also adds new workbench animations, which I think are a really good improvement over the original. These animations actually make sense and aren't just fiddling with thin air or sat there watching the station. In terms of pathing while the thralls are wandering around, it seems alright. From my observations, thralls go from one activity to another, they don't just aimlessly wander, so it seems they probably calculate their path beforehand. They handle those paths very well, they don't seem to get jammed up on doors or other thralls, so that could potentially happen with very densely decorated builds. I did have one instance of a thrall getting jammed on another that was working a furnace, but to be fair, I didn't really leave much space to walk around, and the furnaces weren't exactly laid out in the best way, so it was probably avoidable. They also opened doors and immediately shut it behind them, and they seemed generally well behaved. They do pop out of their animations a bit aggressively, but yeah, a little rough around the edges, and I do think some of the animations might use placeholder assets, like the fluid in the alchemy station jars, but it performs a lot better than I expected just on the pathing front. The jury is still out on server performance. That's something I want to collect data on, but I think it'll take a bit of time to get various information on it. I did notice that workers don't follow you properly as well, in that you command them to follow, they do it for a moment, then run off to fulfill their needs. They're still technically following you, so I think you can move them between bases, but it seems very buggy because they're always trying to run back to their need resource. I think in terms of feedback, I'd like to have it so that if a worker is following you, they're just following you and their needs are basically disabled. Initial impressions then, Living Settlements seems decent. The workbench UI is simple and effective and really easy to understand. Pathing seems generally a lot less problematic than I expected, and I think the system could potentially end up having a lot less friction than most players thought they'd see. I'll be deep diving Living Settlements in an upcoming video, but just on first impressions, not too bad. Companions are of course the other main feature. The first is Lu Fei, a Khitan sorcerer trapped within the soul-corrupting Yothka plant. His dialogue is really quite wonderful, expertly performed and really well written.
I am Lu Fei, sorcerer to the Celestial Emperor of Khitan.
He also promises to teach you thaumaturgy or sorcery if you free him. The promise of the reward, and his dialogue and frankly amazing voice performance is more than enough of a hook to get me interested in doing his storyline. Of course, as of recording, this update's been out for a couple of hours, so I haven't completed his storyline yet, but if he does teach you new sorceries, I think a lot of people will be interested in that. Freya is the second companion, and her story seems a lot more emotionally charged, searching for her kidnapped husband after an attack on her camp. Her voice acting is also really good and sets out a more traditional though interesting tale, with the promise of her husband being able to smith some interesting items for you.
Ymir's beard. Interrupting the dirge of an Aesir warrior is a death wish.
This introduction is much shorter, but hooks you into the story very well. Unfortunately, I can't really do much more of an initial first impressions than that for the companions, as I imagine actually knowing everything about them will take a lot longer, but I will have dedicated guides to unlocking both Freya and Lu Fei coming very soon. Additionally, I found one or two of the new cages around the exiled lands with their jailers nearby. It seems from the pattern that I've found so far they're dotted around some of the NPC camps. I got a tier 3 Hyrcanian Carpenter from this Dogs of the Desert camp, but make sure you clear the camp first, else your new friend might get a bit swarmed. These cages are pretty simple and seem like a good way to add a bit more value to otherwise kinda boring camps. Of course, this is just my initial impressions. I'm going to put more time into deep diving the features, especially Living Settlements, and trying to get as much data and information about it and its performance on servers as possible. Initial impressions from me are pretty positive. There are some bugs of course, but nothing game breaking as of yet, and the thralls from the Living Settlement system do path a lot better than I expected, and honestly I really expected some problems there, so fairly good at first. Hopefully deep dives don't reveal more issues, but well, only time will tell. The devs also did another follow-up Q&A from the last one yesterday, so I'll have a video about that very soon. Make sure you subscribe for all the best Age of Heroes news and content coming down the pipeline, and again, if you want to see it all earlier than everyone else, do check out the Patreon. Thank you for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. I'm really excited to get more videos out to you guys. Do let me know your initial impressions as well in the comments. Again, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you soon.